We're recording now.
Okay. So anyway, to pick that back up, so coming back from Afghanistan, this is around 2012, and then I had this big vacuum of like many veterans coming back and desire to continue to serve and to meaningfully employ my skill sets and motivations and put them to use in a meaningful way and to continue to serve my own country and to, so our neighborhoods and Hurricane Sandy happened and I started working within the communities in Brooklyn, and so then I realized that they value our skill set abroad, but when we come back home we often don't get the basic support to continue our mission or at least to continue to serve and do meaningful things. So a lot of veterans can do a lot to help build neighborhoods, to serve their communities, and that's a meaningful outlet. But then I also saw that just how desolate and just deeply broken the nonprofit world is. For example, the ability to get basic funding and support for putting your skills and ideas to use, and just how this creates a vicious cycle where people that have ideas and ability to contribute are stigmatized as part of the problem instead of the solution. And
you mean specifically, why are they stigmatized?
Well, because it's like the idea is that it's called elite capture. For example, when money and resources go into a community, for example, it could be a village in Africa, it could be a community in America. The dynamics tend to be the same in a very general sense, where you have a few groups or organizations that have what they call a track record. They sort of have already managed to get money for what they do, and they may be great at what they do. They may be corrupt or bad. It doesn't. Regardless, they're the ones that get most of the money. Most charity tends to work this way, where you have a few really big brand names that are very well recognized. They get a lot of funding, and then smaller startup ideas, no matter how good they are, they often have a very hard time getting even basic resources because people say you have to have a track record to get funding. But then in order to get funding, you have to have a track record. But to have that track record of success, you need basic money.
Right.
It's a vicious cycle of chicken or egg bullshit. And this is incredibly damaging, not just to people in these communities that have ideas and talents and skills and passions to facilitate solutions in their own neighborhood, but they can't get any funding.
Right.
And you could talk about how money goes to just a few select actors and how they continue to get the money and most people don't get it. But also when people try to be social entrepreneurs and they try to put their ideas to use to help humanity or to continue to serve, it's very difficult to get even basic resources. And this creates a situation where massive amounts of human capital, be it knowledge, skills, talents, etc., go unrecognized and unsupported. So then people will have to devote their life elsewhere. They'll have to devote it to getting a regular job or to surviving instead of getting the tools to bring their dreams to life or to be able to help.
Right.
And so this is a failure, a fundamental failure, to recognize and invest in human capital and human potential, and to recognize that we can do so much more if we're given just the basic tools to do it. And when you're in a war zone, especially if you're in special warfare or special operations community, as I was, or if you're part of like a very, you could call it elite, or you could call it a very selective program like the Human Terrain System, which is applied sort of social science and anthropology combined with different skill sets in the war. We're essentially a kind of a marriage counselor between the soldiers and the Afghans, kind of bridging the culture and cultural communication and understanding between brigade combat teams or soldiers on the ground and Afghans. And our job is to understand all the human aspects of the battlefield, the human social cultural realities at play, whether it be negotiating in a village or talking to a warlord or trying to reintegrate Taliban peacefully to get them to put down their weapons and become part of the village, or understanding tribal dynamics and things. I mean, what are the implications of eradicating a poppy field? It's going to cause the farmer to be indebted to a warlord, and then he's going to sell their daughters into sex, and then he's going to go join the Taliban. I mean, there's basically understanding the second and third order ripple effects of doing something like dropping a bomb or firing a weapon. So we were like glorified peacemakers or hippies. Our job was to try to mitigate misunderstanding and avoid violence, so we'd have to fire as few shots as possible. Right. So I jokingly say we're trying to be the Oprah Winfrey of the war zone. So human terrain teams, and you hear different things about different human terrain teams, and some are successful, some weren't. You hear a lot of mixed things about that program, but overall, I mean, our team was in a very dynamic part in Nangarhar and Gunnar province, and it was, on the Pakistan border, and some areas were dangerous. There'd be people shooting at us or indirect fire and mortars and stuff like that. Others would be, much nicer areas. Regardless of where we were, it was incredibly beautiful, exotic, gorgeous mountains. I mean, I've seen mountains all over the world. This is by far the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Afghanistan is absolutely gorgeous and breathtaking, and I love the people, I love the culture. But that said, I went from that, where we got the tools and resources to do our job. We could fly in helicopters and, they spent millions of dollars on me just to be
Oprah Winfrey, to be a marriage counselor.
Exactly, to be the Steve Harvey of, trying to, bridge the cultural communication between Afghans and Americans. So it's like, and then I come back and I say, look, if, I have the same skill set, I want to apply it to helping build communities, or at least to helping work with, neighborhoods and do some meaningful things here. And I saw how viciously empty and just cold and cruel and starved of resources that the humanitarian sector is in the nonprofit world, and how much innovation and thought and energy we put into things like iPads and porn and video games and Pokemon Go and stuff like that, and just how little of that our society puts into how we help humanity, and how we sort of divide this wall, or we sort of divide it's almost like we erect a wall between how we think in terms of business and trying to give people the tools to be successful when it comes to profit. But then when it comes to helping humanity, we almost relegate that to a totally different way of thinking, where it's more about deprivation and being willing to, where it's considered, it's almost like you're. And once again, this is a whole other subject, a caveat. I could talk for hours on them.
There's a lot of subjects, I'm sure.
I'm not quite as articulate about this right now as I usually am. Long story short, we treat the area when it comes to helping humanity. We don't give people the resources, and we think in a totally different way. We accept the idea of people not having the resources they need, and we sort of glamorize this idea of people. We accept the idea that people continue to sort of go without the tools they need, and that you're supposed to expect to try to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and that somehow there's a badge of honor to doing everything for free, even if you're far more inefficient in doing it. And I saw just how fundamentally full of shit and just deeply depraved and backward and hypocritical that whole that sector is treated, or at least the world of how nonprofits are treated, and how unfair the funding game is, and how funders often fail to take risks when it comes to new ideas and fresh ideas. And this creates an area where both social entrepreneurs are not given the tools they need, so they're often stigmatized as being, liabilities. Like, well, why should we invest in you? You don't even have a track record.
Right.
And then there's people in these neighborhoods that also could contribute to their own communities, and they're not given the tools. And so I saw that this could be a way, if we can find ways to link people and their talents and skill with the tools to, bring that to life and then help solve problems. This is not only profound for communities, but it's huge for veterans, because people come back, they want to continue to serve, and so you have things like the Mission Continues or Team Rubicon, where they, we've identified that veterans are very good at disaster relief. We can think on our feet, we can self-organize. I've actually never worked with Team Rubicon, but they do great things. And we saw after Hurricane Sandy in New York that people can sporadically come together and self-organize and get things done much more effectively often than top-down bureaucracies. Like FEMA, came in, and there's a lot of gaps and shortcomings where FEMA failed, or where FEMA, in spite of a lot of the people doing good things and working hard, FEMA wasn't able to be effective in every area. There are definitely shortcomings there. And yet, this movement called Occupy Sandy, it was not really a political movement, it was a kind of a rebuilding movement, but it was self-organized, collaborative, horizontal, leaderless movement. There was no leaders. It was a, kind of an emergent, bottom-up type of grassroots initiative. That was
kind of like Lord of the Rings, like that scene in at the end of Lord of the Rings, where like all the different people come together, and the elves and the dwarves and the Gondor and Rohan, they all put aside their differences and then march together. Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. I guess it was definitely it was beautiful in the sense that people all had the same focus and we all just came together and we all really got in these neighborhoods, got our boots dirty, and it was extremely effective. And residents of these areas that were hit by Sandy were extremely grateful because a lot of them felt for the first time they were being recognized and respected for and given like small gestures like laundry soap or blankets, as small as those may seem. The fact that people got what they needed and people were responsive to what they needed after that storm was deeply meaningful to these people who felt for years, sometimes decades, they were ignored by faceless bureaucracies, this is profoundly transformative, and this kind of connection on the ground to people, spending time on the ground in these neighborhoods after a storm, this can be replicated, and there are ways to fund this, there are ways to scale this. And so I then started thinking about how veterans can meaningfully contribute and what it means to come back from a war zone and feel like your skills are not valued, like you're told to go get a regular job instead of continuing to fight for things you believe in. And that was bullshit. And so the final thing I'd say here is that you mentioned seeing how divided the country was. This actually especially hit me in a real... The first time this really rocked me personally was 2007. 2006 I was in Iraq for my second time. It was in the midst of the peak of some of the Shia-Sunni violence. They bombed the mosque in Samarra, and then it was one of the mosque of one of the imams, I believe Al-Askari Shrine, I think. I may have to. I think it was the one, but they basically, what happened was this unleashed. It was obviously outsiders like Al Qaeda in Iraq, and it was not Iraq. Like, this is not something Iraqi insurgents would normally do. They would not normally. Most Sunni insurgents would not bomb a Shia mosque. That is something that the worst of the worst would do. And these were foreign fighters.
Zarqawi.
Yeah, exactly. These were foreign fighters that came over Iraq's borders through Syria and other places.
Jordan.
And they played with this proxy war between, surrogate, war with Iran, coming over through Basra, supporting the Shia militias and stuff like that, and then Sunni insurgents supported and funded by, those channels. So Iraq became a proxy battleground of these two. The sort of Shia-Sunni became the fault line, the default sort of tribal camps of this kind of ethno-sectarian and political violence. Mm-hmm. So most Iraqi Shia and Sunni didn't hate each other, but those became the identity politics.
Right.
There was a very real Shia-Sunni divide in the sense of political power and fear of being marginalized from the Iraqi parliament and stuff like that. So long story short, I came back from Iraq very, seeing how horribly divided and trampled on that country was and how much they were suffering. And then in 2007, I was working in the U.S. Central Command in Tampa, where they have Central Command and Special Operations Command, SOCOM. Mm-hmm. So I was working there as a liaison, and then that's where that was when they had the troop surge. And I saw the way Congress was voting on the troop surge was profoundly upsetting to me. And the reason was, if you take a moment and look at what the troop surge meant, well, what are the variables that we use to evaluate this decision? On the one hand, you have the lives of soldiers, and on the other hand, you have the future of Iraq and the lives of Iraqis, plus the stability of the region through a proxy war. So right. However you feel about the troop surge, whether you think we should stay in Iraq or pull out, whatever your decision calculus is, there's some serious variables there that involve the lives of soldiers and Iraqis. So the decisions you make based on that, the last thing that should matter is what fucking party you belong to. Mm-hmm. Being a Democrat or a Republican should have had absolutely nothing to do with that decision calculus, and yet that vote on the troop surge was split almost neatly, almost perfectly along party lines. Mm-hmm. And that's when it really hit me. The tribalism I saw in Iraq, and then eventually would later see in Afghanistan, the kind of tribal system, as frustrating as it could be, actually made sense in context. And yet I felt like our country had become tribal in a way that was far less honorable. I felt that our Congress had become its own tribal warfare in a way that was far less excusable than the tribal warfare in Afghanistan. And that was deeply upsetting to me. Mm-hmm.